Welcome back to the Games Revealed channel. I'm James, and we're going to be going over a couple of fun things today with the software of the Steam Deck. And we're going to make this a little bit of a deeper dive, just like our hardware in another video. We're going to go deep into the Linux portion of it. We're going to go deep enough to where maybe you'll understand why they chose to go this route. But if you hold out until the end of the video too, if you finish watching this video, you're also going to have a lot of your questions answered because we're going to be going over a whole section of that. Before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, bash it with your crowbar, and let's get into it. To start off, let's go over some highlights of the software features. This is a weird one for me, partially just because a lot of the features that were able to find already exist, and I think this is a big part of this whole thing, is that the Steam Deck isn't necessarily new from a software side of things. We're going to go over a couple things that are newish, but really this has been building up since the inception of Steam itself, that the software has been built up. And then with some additional pieces for this all to work, which we're going to go into a little later, it makes the Steam Deck work with the Steam software, right? The stuff that we can download on Linux, Windows, Mac OS, whatever it is. There's going to be a special flavor on the Steam Deck though. And with that, if you remember how the Steam OS kind of got, made, it was from the Steam Machine. I don't know if you remember that. It's years ago. Valve's first attempt at this type of thing, which is a video game console. And that is to essentially to try to make something cheap enough, performant enough, and also compatible enough with the PC ecosystem to be a PC console. It failed, obviously, on every aspect, I think, and every point that we just mentioned. It was still much too expensive, much more expensive than the consoles of the day. It was also less performant if you tried to get as close to the price as like a PS3, and it was also, maybe it was the PS4. It might have been the PS4. It's been a while. Probably closer to the PS4. And then also it just wasn't very compatible with a lot of games. It just because that Linux layer, it still could if you're running the Linux side of things. If you're running the Windows side, obviously it was compatible for the most part if it was performant. So with that, let's go over some of the highlights now. Steam Chat. Yes. Yeah, Steam Chat's going to be there. It'll be interesting to see how the digital touchpad keyboard works, or using the controllers. It's probably going to be just like anything else we've used between a phone and PS5, PS4, whatever it is, where you have to enter things in on a digital keyboard. Notifications, once again, that's nothing new. We have seen some video of it being kind of cool, where it will come out from the side, bottom, I believe the bottom right, and it's on the video is not going to translate very well. That might be pretty cool. The way that it pops up might be a little bit more new, more up to speed and not so old school. Like, I don't know if they've changed that. And that's notifications. That I'm even more talking about like achievements and stuff like that. I think anything that happens, whether or not it's in the game or outside the game, is going to go through the notification system that they have. Cloud saves. This is a cool one, and this one kind of goes with also the fast suspend and resume, in my opinion. But the cloud saving system works now. It just works better with the way the Steam Deck works, where you can turn it off, turn it on, and go and play on another system. You're essentially going to be able to play on the go, get home, put the game down, or the game down, put it and put the system into resume, into a sleep state, and then go onto your computer and continue playing, it's going to have a pretty nice adaptive save system with that. So that is going to be improved from what we have today on Windows. And the remote play, once again, it's going to be probably pretty standard. So if you've ever done remote play on your PC, on your laptop, it's going to be fairly similar, except for you're going to have a device in your hand and you're going to be able to play at a higher resolution, fidelity, whatever it is you want. You're going to be able to play it a little bit better if you're playing from your PC. With that comes lag, of course. I'm a little bit hesitant to do remote play. I will say, and this is one I'm going to do a video later on, remote play with the Xbox and the PlayStation 5 will be pretty awesome, and I think it's very much doable, and I think it's going to be the reason why you're going to want to dual boot, which is another, I would say, software feature we did talk about on the hardware, but dual booting will be important if you want to run certain applications inside of your Steam Deck, right? So with that remote play, who knows? Maybe it's going to work with Proton. I don't know yet, but we do know that it will work on the Windows as long as it's compatible with the CPU, which I'd assume so. I believe it's a full-blown, it's not like it's an ARM chip or anything like that. It should be able to run Windows full-blown. So I could be wrong. I don't think so, because I believe it's been confirmed that if you load Windows, you can play Epic Games or whatever else. Might be another reason why you want to load Windows. I know that there's a lot of videos that have been out there that says side loading, or it's not even side loading, like dual booting your Steam Deck is a bad idea. I greatly disagree. It just depends on what your needs are. If you have a lot of games that you want to play that aren't going to be compatible with the Steam Deck, Steam OS, Linux-based system with Proton, you're probably going to want to go with Windows or dual boot. So that's a whole, it really comes down to what are your needs, but you're going to have the best experience for sure with the Steam OS. Okay, so going into some of the other things like the suspending, we talked about that last time, but you're going to be able to put your device down and stop playing and have the game suspend, bring it up, and it comes back into the foreground from the background. And I'm wondering how you can switch, because I know with if you can switch between games and if they're able to resume play. So if you go from one game to another, if any of it caches inside the hard drive, I'd be surprised if it did, but I'm wondering if there is a little bit of optimistic caching there. That would be an interesting one. That's what's going to make everything happening in the next few days is going to be cool, because this video is happening a couple days before the Steam Deck comes out, and so we don't fully know some of these answers, and it's going to be fun to dig down into it. With that being said, the resume feature is going to be pretty cool, and it is a marriage, like I've mentioned before, between the hardware and the software. You gotta have things optimized, but yes, a big chunk of this does rely on the software to make sure it's optimized. So with that being said, I mean, it's going to pretty much be the same experience that you're used to. It's just going to be on a portable device and a new UI, because and that's one of the things we're going to get into in the questions, is that the new UI that's going to be rolled out slowly. Now the operating system and the compatibility layer, the translation layer, so that you can play Windows-based games on a Linux device. It's very reminiscent of Wine and these essentially translation layers, because Windows and Linux and how they handle their architecture and their applications are pretty different, and typically very difficult to add a translation layer to these. Proton's going to be a pretty awesome system, and it has a pretty awesome database to let us know about that. So from a software side, it's going to be awesome. Cut to the future, where I've now had a cup of coffee, and I need to explain Proton a little bit more. I realized that's one of the most important parts of this whole thing, the Steam Deck, It actually is what's going to run your games in Linux. Now, there are some games that are native, like 7 Days to Die, but let's get into just a little bit of what Proton is, and then you can get back to the rest of this video because I cut in rudely. Proton is a compatibility layer made for Microsoft Windows, and it's made to run games. And it was made by Valve with help from code weavers. It essentially is like Wine, and the difference is Wine is more for Windows applications. Let's say, even though there's already, like, I believe Linux versions, but like some of the Adobe suite or just whatever you need to run on Linux that runs natively in Windows, you can use Wine for, and that's what I've normally used. And I know that actually some games, at least 10, 12 years ago, were compatible with Wine, but Proton is completely, the whole point is to make it so that games run inside of Linux, and it's supposed to be automatic, meaning you're not supposed to have to tweak with anything. That being said, I mean, the Proton database says otherwise sometimes, meaning you do have to tweak some stuff, but if it's gone platinum, I believe you don't have to tweak anything. That's the whole point, is that it just runs like if it was Windows. And I think this is gonna be a game changer. I think if they really nail this down, and it looks like they are, Proton's gonna be an amazing piece of software, and we're lucky to have it. So the ProtonDB.com, I believe is what it is where you're going to find all the games that are compatible with Proton and the Steam Deck in Linux mode. If you're going into Windows mode, then a lot more games are going to be compatible. You're just going to have a lot less performance. So with that compatibility layer, I believe they're also improving performance. So that's it. That's Proton. And back to past self, I guess. That being said, Proton's not the only cool thing about this. This is actually been a long time coming. The Steam OS has had 2 other versions before what we're having now. This is version 1, 2, and then now we're on 3. The version 2 was Debian Linux. So it's still a great flavor of Linux, I think. But Steam OS is actually based on the Arch Linux. And from my understanding, that's going to give us a lot of benefits, especially for customizing speed. So the reason I believe they went with it is that for games, the most important thing is speed. How fast can you get your games, and how optimized can you get the games? And performance is king, right? And we've seen in the benchmarks how well the Steam OS really does with Proton and with speed, right? And so I'm assuming with Arch, they also get a lot of customizing of performance pieces, probably CPU, GPU. I'm sure they have their own drivers. They probably have a lot of things that they can customize and optimize, and hopefully based on games and stuff, so they can run the CPU at lower speeds to help with battery. That's a couple things that potentially Arch could have offered them. I believe I'm curious because I didn't dig that deep to see the reason why they really want to go from Debian, but I'm assuming customization of the operating system itself and also the speed for gaming. Those are 2 big portions of it. It is lightweight. That being said, this is where I've mixed up things a little bit in past videos, and I want to clarify. It is a Linux-based system. Arch is a flavor of Linux. The desktop sits on top of it, so if you want a graphical interface, a GUI, you need to get a desktop for it. This does have a desktop, which is interesting that it's not its own flavor of desktop, like its own GUI, but it makes sense that why write a whole system for drawing everything, right? That's UI based. But it is based on the KDE Plasma 5 desktop. So it looks pretty standard for Linux. It's nothing flashy or anything like that. From my understanding, it will auto load up into the Steam UI. It's not big picture mode, from my understanding. It's going to be its own flavor of kind of big picture mode, but it's going to load up into that. I don't know, like, if it crashes, if it boots, or if it goes back into the desktop. I don't know that portion yet until I believe we get more hands-on. If you do know the answer, let me know in the comments before, and especially if you have a link, that helps. Like, just tell me, makes it hard for me to believe, but if you have a link to how the desktop works with the essentially works with the Steam, or not the Steam OS, but the Steam client, I would like to know. So that's just a little bit of what I wanted to explain, a little bit more what the operating system does and why it is different, but also at the same time pretty similar to past versions that Valve's done. SteamOS they've been working on for a long time, and it's once again another flavor of Linux that's based on Arch. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing for performance and I think compatibility. And you're going to be able to run. You don't need to run SteamOS to run Proton. It is confirmed that Proton and all the stuff that they've been working on should work on other flavors of Linux. That being said, you know, it's never going without it being tested, and with each Linux flavor being, you know, a little different, there could be some compatibility issues. And I probably would stick with something that's more geared towards gaming, like the SteamOS. Yeah, let's move on to the well, actually, right before we get to that, make sure that you check out the website in the description, onlysteamdeck.com. We're adding posts every day. We have a starter pack there. If you're interested in the type of SD card that you want to get for your Steam Deck, I'd recommend getting them now because they are going to get sold out. I think they will. They're going to get harder and harder, and I kind of see it happening more and more. And between like more and more creators on YouTube wanting to get SD card, you know, for their video cameras, for other cameras, I'm seeing some versions of SD cards starting to sell out more and more. I do have some great choices below that I've personally bought and I will be using in my Steam Deck, and I use in my devices. And I chose them partially because they work really good with the Switch, and so it works like you really need a good read speed. That being said, that's done. Let's move on to the thing that I said in the beginning of the video. If you paid attention, then the questions answered, and I really tried to make sure that it's a pretty. I wouldn't say I added too many questions. I wanted to make sure that the questions were good, and a lot of them were taken from Steam's website. So some of these you might have heard, but I want to go over these, and I think they're important for us to know. Okay, first question is, can you boot an OS off the SD card? Yes, which is pretty cool. And now that being said, it will have some speed issues, and I believe that games-wise, it'll be just fine running games on an SD card, but an operating system might be a little annoying, but that might allow you to do. I don't know if Windows can be booted on an SD card, but maybe if you want to do your main boot as Windows, and then when you plug in your SD card, it could be Linux. It adds options, and I love options because then I can optimize things to the playstyle I have. I love it, and including I do a lot of software development and game development, and it would be kind of cool to see how that would be handled with that setup. What can you tell us about the BIOS, and does it allow dual boot? Now, I did answer this one in the hardware, and you can go watch that video for a more in-depth answer to this. But yes, it does. It does allow for multiple boots of Linux. So if you wanted to have 3 or 4 different Linux flavors, you can. If you want to have more than one flavor of Windows, you can. It's going to allow for it. And like I said, if you want the full experience of all the video game ecosystem that's on the PC, you might have to dual boot, and it's not a bad thing. And I know there's some people out there that are saying it's bad. Whatever works best for you. If you're going to want to play certain games that are not that are just aren't going to be supported by Proton starting out, or maybe forever, who knows? Epic, who knows with them. you might have to go to the Windows route. That's fine. You can dual boot. It's totally okay to dual boot. And I've done it multiple times on multiple computers. Nothing wrong with it, and it won't hurt anything. Does docking the deck improve performance? It does not. It is always going to have the same performance levels. With the Switch, it does actually improve it. With the Steam Deck, it does not. We'll find out in the future, though. It could be optimized if they wanted, but it's just right now that they've confirmed no, it's not going to improve it. Will the UI on Steam Deck replace Big Picture? And this is where it gets a little complicated, because they say it's going to happen in stages, meaning I'm kind of curious if, I don't think Steam OS on like Windows or laptop will get replaced, but I think on the device, like, so when we get our Steam Deck, I think it will be the UI that they want, and maybe it's in beta, who knows. But that will be the version. It just probably won't be on your laptop or other devices starting out, and that's probably what they mean. Will improvements to Proton for Steam Deck, like anti-cheat support, also apply to Proton on desktop? Yes. These improvements will make it to all systems using Proton. So, it essentially is, they're trying to make sure that anti-cheat software is working, and that's the biggest crux for a lot of the major multiplayer games, right? Is that I think Apex Legends now works, but that's one of the issues with some of these games, is that the anti-cheat isn't supported on Linux, and they need to fix that. So I think they're actively trying to make sure it works, and it will be very interesting to see how that does get fixed in the near future. Can I run non-Steam games through Proton on Steam Deck? Yes, you can run non-Steam games through Proton. And that's an interesting one. So that means that, and we know that Proton's not tied directly into the Steam OS, or like it can be used in other operating systems, Linux based, that is. So it will be interesting to see if companies optimize their games outside of Steam, like on the Epic Store and stuff like that, to run on Steam Deck. But I guess the Epic Store would have to support, well, no, the Epic Store actually supports Linux, but the games in it don't. So this will be a very interesting one, because I bet you through the interface it will have to be enabled. So Epic Games is going to have to specifically allow for game companies to optimize their builds to work with Proton, to then allow it to be installed on Linux. Because I believe it, unless it's native to Linux, Epic Games Launcher does not work with Linux. Or the Epic Game Launcher does work with it, but the games aren't installable unless they're compatible with Linux. Can you have multiple Steam accounts on one Steam Deck? And yes, you can. It's going to be just like a PC. It's going to be just like any other Steam platform that you've used on whatever device you've used. You're going to be able to swap in and out different accounts. That's it. Those are the questions. If you have any more questions, ask them below and I'll get you an answer. If you have some answers to some of the questions I've offered that are even more insightful, then answer below. And once again, if you liked this video, make sure to subscribe, like, and bash with your crowbar that subscribe button or bell. You can bash both. I mean, I'm not against bashing multiple things with a crowbar. And then last and not least, make sure to watch some of our other Steam Deck videos, and you're going to see them on this end screen. So make sure to watch those, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Later, guys. Later.